For us, this generational transition must take place at a time when the velocity of change in almost every aspect of our business life is accelerating. It took radio 38 years to reach 50 million people. It took the iPod 5 years to reach more than 100 million. In 1992, there were 1 million internet devices. Last year, there was 1.6 billion. Google didn't exist in 1997. Today, the world searches more than 34,000 times a second, or 20 million times since I started these remarks. Facebook is now 6.5 years old. If it were a country, its population would be the size of the United States, Canada, and Denmark combined. We now communicate at the speed of electrons with content that can become viral instantly, and that is not going to change. So we've concluded that given the magnitude of external and internal challenges that we are facing, the single greatest determinant of our future success is the quality and the character of our leadership, and it is why talent and leadership development is our #1 strategic priority, and it has been for a number of years. And as part of our approach to developing leaders, we've developed several foundational convictions. First, it's essential to get the very best talent. For us, recruiting and retention is a very high priority, and when we have discussions with prospective employees, we talk about what would be a total value perspective for the company. Do you have stimulating work? Will you work in challenging assignments? Will you have an opportunity for professional growth and career development? Of course, we talk about salary and benefits. I'll give you a little insight as you think about your leadership development programs. Early on in my tenure, I talked to our summer interns. These are folks sort of trying us on for size, and we're trying them on for size. They're college students, and I was hugely impressed that they weren't asking very much about salary, and they wanted to talk about benefits, and the benefit they wanted to talk about most was vacation. Vacation. Now, I got to tell you, when I started, I worked for a person who wasn't highly conversational. I don't think vacation ever came up in any of the interview process. And when I was working, my boss came by one day and said, "Oh yeah, you get 2 weeks vacation. We're really busy. You can't take it. Get back to work." And that was literally the full expression of the discussion about vacation. In talking to summer interns, they were talking about the desire to have 4 weeks of vacation in their first year rather than 2, because they were concerned about work-life balance. And I got to tell you, thankfully I didn't say this, but honestly, my first reaction, which won't reflect well on me, is don't you have to work before you worried about work-life balance? You're students. But happily, I did not say that. And I listened to them, and you would be very impressed, because they spoke about being affiliated with community groups, church groups, groups of students that they have known, some even back in their high school classes, where for year over year now they were involved in philanthropic programs, community service programs, outreach domestically, internationally, rebuilding houses, cleaning up parks, setting up playgrounds. I mean, the kind of things that made me feel smaller for having the first thought, because that isn't what I did on my vacations when I was their age. And I certainly thought that they were very persuasive in their argument. We changed our vacation policy as a result of those discussions, and I've concluded this generation that's coming into the workforce is a very, very good generation indeed. We've expanded the number of internship programs. You might think we stopped the internship program after that conversation, but we've expanded it to 1,600. We've also expanded our participation in our Getting Started leadership development program. So we hire about 13,000 people a year in our company. About 2,100 of those hires are recent college graduates. We take the top 20% of that class and we induct them into a series of very formal leadership development experiences that have classes, mandatory rotational assignments, because we think it's essential that you see the company. I think one of the problems with our company has been we lived in stovepipes for too long, and you need to see the breadth and depth of the company, not just so you can be a better leader and understand the business. We think it's foundational in knowing who you are and what you like and what really excites you. And when you find out what really excites you, you're a far more fulfilled professional and more productive executive. We require mentoring, but mentoring in both directions. So the newer employees have senior company people who provide mentorship for them, but they also have to adopt a senior person, because as is the case with the vacation discussion, you learn a lot through the eyes of others who are entering the workforce, bringing new ideas and new energy. And then we support them in their pursuit of an advanced degree as well. Similar to the vacation policy, we were asked to consider more flexible hours, which we do because so many employees were talking about a desire to participate in child care or caring for aging parents. And certainly with the passage of each year, I'm all for caring for aging parents. Let me give you a note on technology, one other thought. If you're in an enterprise and you want to hire the best talent and retain that talent, and you're not providing an information technology suite, a communication suite, a suite of tools and capabilities that are at least as good as the TERP mom and dad provides in the dorm room, you are not going to attract this talent and you are not going to keep this talent. So we had to re-examine some resource allocations and put a little more money in the capital budget to assure we had the infrastructure that allowed this generation that's entering the workforce to be very productive. Because I assure you, a good technology day for me is when I can get the photocopier to work. That is not where they live, and we've really had to pay attention to that aspect of the environment. We also know that the nature of the workforce that we have is fundamentally shifting. Today, talent is much more multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-gender, multi-generational, as I mentioned, and we're better and stronger for this. Lockheed Martin, if it is anything, is a system integrator of very complex projects, and it's absolutely critical when you're dealing with those levels of complexity in systems that you look at the challenges in as full a measure as is possible at the outset. The very best way to do that is to start with a highly diversified set of perspectives. Probably the best illustration I've ever heard of this came from my predecessor, Norm Augustine, who was chairman and CEO before me. Talking about the space shuttle program early on in its development, there was a need to get weight out of this vehicle. For those of you who work in this industry, getting weight out of a spacecraft is a delicate and expensive thing. There were many graybeards around the tables for many days trying to figure out, do you change the structure, do you change the propulsion system, do you take out redundant avionics, all of which would have had critical mission impacts. From the back of the room, there was a young voice, probably snuck in the room when you think about it, who made this observation: why don't you just stop painting the big expendable fuel tank that lasts for 9 minutes and then we throw it into the ocean and go fish it out and refurbish it? Why don't we stop painting that? The short version of that story is that paint weighed about 800 pounds and was a gold mine because 800 pounds were converted into payload rather than paint. Plus, you didn't have the labor it took to paint the fuel tank or the adverse environmental circumstances of using epoxy-based space hardware qualified paint in the first place, and that didn't come from the systems engineers around the table. It came from a person with a fundamentally different perspective. So in our company, diversity isn't about numbers or a quota. It's a philosophy where we look to include individuals who have had different experiences and different points of view, and to make sure those points of views are valued, because we think when you bring together disparate voices who have a common objective and shared values, you're likely to get the very best level of innovation. We know we need to tap new talent pools, seek out more women and minorities, and reach down into schools and encourage the rising generation. I'll say this in the alternative: if you work in a company today that rejects the notion that there is real opportunity and real value and advantage in diversity, I want you as a competitor. We also recognize that leadership and management are not the same thing. Complex organizations do need both expressions of this professionalism, but they are absolutely not the same. Management, in our view, is about dealing with complexity. Lots of moving parts. It's a special gift to have all the moving parts moving in the same direction at the same time to accomplish complex tasks. We know this very well. But leadership is more about preparing the organization for change and showing the way. When I work with our classes on strategic leadership, and I do this often, they have a great interest in understanding how they can become more effective strategic leaders in the company. I told them it's very simple. They only have to master 3 tasks, really: the out-of-body experience, time travel, and the artistry of a televangelist. And here's why. Here's why. If you are serious about examining how the organization has to change, you have to get out of yourself, and you have to take yourself out of the company, and you have to look back with an objective rigor that is blistering. You have to look at your strengths and your weaknesses, the challenges and opportunities, and you really have to understand who you are and why. Then you have to move yourself as far as you possibly can into the future. In our case, that's pretty far because you'd like to align it with your product cycles or your development cycles, and we have products that last 30 and 40 and 50 years, and that's not an exaggeration. So you need to try to look out a half a century as to what will be the core competencies, what will be the state of the world, what will be the challenges and opportunities then. You have to bring yourself back, come back inside the company, and then persuade a huge number of professionals who have been enormously successful in doing exactly what they have been doing the way they have been doing that brought them to this state of their professional and executive lives, where their esteem, identity, compensation, rank, position has all been built on this, and essentially tell them stop doing that and start doing something else because the something else is going to be more valued at a future time.